Okay, so this is Power BI Desktop. And when you open it for the first time, you'll see there's quite a lot to take in. We've got stuff at the top, stuff on the right, on the left, and at the bottom. There's stuff everywhere. So lots to take in. But what I'm going to do is, rather than worrying too much about it now, we'll talk you through the different areas and functions as we use them. So we'll just focus on one area at a time. The first area I want to look at is the ribbon menu, which is this menu along the top. Okay, and we've got various different tabs, and we'll look at some of those as we go through the session. But for now, the first thing we want to do is look at how we connect Power BI Desktop to our data sources. So there's an area up here on the ribbon menu in the top left called Data, and you'll see you've got buttons for Excel, buttons for SQL Server. If you click on Get Data, you'll see a few more of the common data sources popping up. And if you click on More, you'll get the full list of pre-built connectors that Power BI has. At the last count, this was around kind of September 2022, there was something like 86 pre-built connectors available in Power BI Desktop. A lot of them are for common Microsoft tools, so Excel, SharePoint, Access. You'll also see them for other database engines like Oracle or MySQL. There are connectors now for Google BigQuery, Azure, basically all of the Microsoft cloud services. And there's also lots for things like kind of niche particular software solutions, things like Smartsheet, there's kind of HR systems that are covered in here, and various other things as well that you may come across and you may use in your business. So a really good place to start with understanding the potential for Power BI in your business is to have a look through this list and compare it with the systems that you actually use in your organization, because it may well be there are some easy wins in here in terms of connectors that hook up to systems that you use already. In terms of how they all work, there are 86 of them and they're all subtly different, but fundamentally they're all doing the same kind of thing. And what that's doing is they give you an option to provide a location of where your data is held. And then what they will do is check that you've actually got permission to access that data in the first place. So if we take an example, if we click on SQL Server, you'll see that it will ask you for the name of your SQL Server. And if you want to, you can specify which database on there you want to use. If we have a look at Excel, it will take you to a normal kind of Windows Explorer, and you'll be able to navigate through your folders and find the spreadsheet that you want to use data from. And likewise, there are other options in here. If you use systems like Dynamics or SharePoint that are based on the web, if you look for a SharePoint folder, it will ask you to provide the URL, which is the web address of where your data is held. Now, once you've put these things in, the next step is to know that you actually have access, and you need to prove to Power BI that you have access to the data that you need. So as a rule of thumb, if you cannot access the data that you're looking for outside of Power BI, i.e. if it's an Excel file that's on somebody else's C drive or a SharePoint list that you don't currently have access to, you will not be able to access it from Power BI either. So you'll just need to think about the data that you need to access and the permissions that you've got, and you might need to check in with your IT team and ask them if they can provide the appropriate access to help you get connected and work with your data. So you'll see at the top that Excel is such a popular connector that it even appears in its own big button on the main screen in Power BI Desktop. So this is probably because, let's be honest, every business on the planet has at least a bit of important data stored in spreadsheets. So we're going to start with this connector because it's one that pretty much anyone who touches Power BI is going to get some value from. So if we click on this, it'll bring up our Windows Explorer, and we're going to navigate through our folders and we'll find this Intro to Power BI sample dataset. Okay, and we'll double click it and it will connect for us. Now this spreadsheet's got some dummy data in that we're going to use to work through during the session that hopefully will give you a flavour of what Power BI is capable of and how it can take quite messy and kind of unstructured spreadsheets that we all see day to day in our kind of working life and actually set up automated processes to clean them up and make them usable that can really, really save you time and effort on a regular basis. So let's have a look at the data that we've got. We've got a sheet here called product details. This is a bit of a mess, to be honest. You'll see when we click on it in this navigator pane, it brings up a preview of what we've got. And you'll see in here, there's column headers, lots of blanks, things like that. bit of a mess really. We've got one called sales breakdown, which is very similar. Again, lots of gaps around the top and the sides and lots of data, but lurking away in the spreadsheet. And then we've got a little one called wholesaler, which is nice and clean. This is the kind of thing that Power BI loves. Okay, a nice, clean, simple columnar table with one value per field, basically. So having picked our 3 sheets that we want, each of these represents a worksheet in our Excel workbook. Okay, so we tick the ones we want, we've seen the preview, and then we're going to press load. And Power BI over the next few seconds will connect and actually import that data for us. Depending on the size of database that you're connecting to, this process can take a lot longer. I've done work with databases on SQL with kind of millions of rows of data, and it can take a few minutes to pull everything down. But once it's in, you'll get the same results. So what you'll see over on this far right-hand side of the screen is a section called Fields. Okay, and in here you'll see the names of the 3 worksheets from Excel that we just pulled in. And if you click on the little arrow next to them, you'll then see within them the fields that were in those spreadsheets. So here's a little kind of language tip, I guess, around understanding Power BI. When we talk about a field in Power BI, these things here, what we're really talking about is the equivalent of a column in a spreadsheet or in a SQL database or any other data source, really. So a field is the same as a column, okay? Now, if we have a look at the sales breakdown one and the product details one, you'll see these are the ones when we saw the preview where I said they looked like a bit of a mess. They didn't really have column headers and they had lots of gaps. So we're going to have to do something about these during the session, and we're going to have to clean them up and try and make them usable so that they're as nice and tidy and simple to understand as this wholesaler table. Then Power BI gives us some tools immediately to start having a look and understanding the state that our data's in. So if we go now all the way over to the far left-hand side of the screen, you'll see we've got 3 little buttons down the side. The first one at the top is the one we're on, which is report. And that's basically this big report canvas here, which a little bit later on is going to be where we build the visuals for our report. Underneath that is a tab called data. And if we click on that, what you'll see is the list of tables again that we've got and the fields within them. But you'll also see a full view of all the data that's in those tables. And if you look at this product details one here, you start to get a bit of a sense of why it's looking a bit strange in the list of columns down here. Why haven't we got real column names? Well, because we've got empty rows rather at the top. We've got empty rows at the bottom. And in the middle, we've kind of got this sort of pivot table view where it's a pivot on a pivot, where we've got basically each field or cell is representing 3 or 4 things at once. So the year, a product, and a kind of product category at the top. So what we need to do is kind of unpivot this table at some point so that it ends up looking like our wholesaler one, which is in this nice clean format where one cell represents one piece of information only. The final tab is one called model. Now, Power BI has incredibly powerful data modeling capabilities, and we're just going to scratch the surface today because it's just a taster session. But in reality, in this screen, you can end up with huge, really quite complex models of all sorts of different tables within your data joined together and all interconnected. And this is really powerful because what it means is when we come up here and build our visual reports later on, you can join data tables from all sorts of different systems together using common keys. And then you can build a report that displays data from all those different sources all in one screen. And better than that, you can start to interact with it and see things cross-filter across those different data sources. So more of that later on, and we'll show you how that works in a really basic example in a bit. But the reality is for now, what we've got in our data model is just 3 disconnected tables. There's no relationships or joins between them, and that's mostly because we've got these 2 really messy tables. And one of these we're going to clean up in a minute, and we'll see what impact that actually has on joining together your tables and creating a data model. So kind of more on this screen a little bit later on.
So in that short section, we've had a look at Power BI Desktop and how it can be used to connect to your data sources. First of all, we had a look at the 80-odd built-in connectors that Power BI has out of the box to let you connect to and hook up to your existing systems. Then we use one of those connectors to connect to an Excel spreadsheet. And finally, we use the Navigator pane to pick and preview the data that we had inside that spreadsheet and pull it through into tables and fields within Power BI Desktop.